Andrew McCART, IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. Delighted to be joined. I have actually interviewed you before. It was in Texas when Ramirez fought Hooker. That was the first time I interviewed you, Dan Rafael. How's things, mate? I've not seen you for a long time, so I know you're still covering boxing, doing your bits and pieces, but how are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back. I've been in Vegas since, like a lot of the guys I've seen this week, haven't been here for a fight since Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury rematch. That was February of 2020. So it's great to be back in Vegas with fans. There was a great crowd. I was at the fight in Texas with Canelo and Billy Joe, but that's different than Vegas. And it's like the MGM, which is the host hotel. It's like old home. I've been here so many times, so it's been great to be back.
Well, we did speak off camera a little bit. You did tell me how many times you've been to the MGM and how many Pacquiao fights. You're lucky. You've 24, I think it was, that you've covered 24 Pacquiao fights. But let's talk about this one here. This will be your 25th.
This will be 24.
This will be 24 here. Pacquiao versus Ugas. Unfortunately, I think we all wanted the Pacquiao versus Spence fight. Unfortunately, Spence got that horrific injury to his eye. Get well soon, Errol Spence. But Ugas, Pacquiao, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a real fight. I mean, I think just because people may not have heard of Ugas or he doesn't have sort of the same level of name recognition as Errol Spence should not equate that with him not being a worthy opponent to fight Manny Pacquiao. Once you get past the Manny Pacquiao, Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, Sean Porter, those types of names in the welterweight division, Ugas is in that next group of fighters. That's a worthy guy. He's beaten some good opponents. He's a great amateur. The losses that he suffered earlier in his career came in the 140-pound weight class, largely attributed to issues making the weight. But since he's come up to welterweight, he's been terrific. His only loss in that span has been an extremely close, some would say very controversial points loss to Sean Porter for a world title. The kind of loss that you may not get your hand raised, but it allows the public to recognize that you're the real deal. And so that's Ugas. And the other thing that's good about it is this. He's a late opponent for Manny and vice versa, but it's not like he's just being thrown in on a couple of weeks' notice. He was training to defend his title in the co-feature of this card against Fabian Maidana. It just so happens that almost simultaneously to Errol, getting the notification from the pre-fight medical exam that he had the torn retina, right around that same time, Maidana had gotten cut in training, in a sparring session. So both of those guys were out. They're able to have Ugas and Pacquiao agree to fight each other to keep the show on and still have a good fight. So Ugas is not one of these guys who just got the call on 11 days notice and said, hey, get in the gym and make weight. No, he's been training for however many months here in Vegas to prepare for Maidana. Now he's stepping up to fight Pacquiao, and it's a change of opponent for Pacquiao also. But they're pros. They've been around a long time. As both of them have said time and again, building up over the last couple of weeks, there's not going to be any huge things that they're going to see from the other guy they've never seen in their long careers as Pacquiao, certainly as a professional, Ugas as a pro, as an amateur also.
Another intriguing factor to this is obviously the WBA belt that was taken from Pacquiao, and Ugas obviously won it in a championship fight, but this is the belt that was taken from Pacquiao. I know your relationship with the WBA isn't the best, but at least we get some redemption, would you call it, or something to see who is the real champion, the WBA champion.
I mean, it's just sort of serendipity that if there's going to be a replacement situation, that it would be to clarify the nonsense of what's going on with the WBA, which is under extreme pressure and fire based on the number of titles they're handing out that really was accentuated by that horrendous decision in one of their interim title fights in this weight class between Michael Fox and Gabriel Maestria a few weeks ago. So at the end of the day, I don't agree with what the WBA did by taking the title from Pacquiao, claiming inactivity when there's numerous other boxing champions that have been inactive because of the pandemic. And certainly in the case of Pacquiao, you can't just set up a fight because of the amount of money that those events command. There was a time where there was no fans allowed, so a huge part of these events is the tickets. If you can't have tickets, it's impossible to do those kinds of fights. That's why Wilder Fury didn't happen, last fall, because they couldn't have a crowd. So they did Pacquiao dirty, the WBA. And they handed Ugas the title. It's not Ugas' fault. But at the end of the day, they're going to fight each other. And when it's all done, they'll only be, the winner will have the main WBA title.
I did read somewhere that the WBA are looking to clean up this whole situation. I remember years ago your tweets and the rancid WBA and stuff like that. Wretched, that was it, sorry. Wretched. The rancid, this is probably a worse word. But they are looking to clean it up. Do you believe it? Do you think they will? Because obviously we know the money involved in boxing and stuff like that. Do you believe the WBA when they say they're going to clean up these titles?
I mean, in the end, I don't, but I hope I'm proven wrong. And I say that because, Gilberto Mendoza, the president of the WBA, has told me numerous times going back a decade plus ago that they were going to do the exact same thing, and they would start to do it, and there'd be a few of the fights that would take place that would get rid of interim titles, or they would order these other fights and it would reduce a little bit, and then all of a sudden they would start to percolate and there'd be more and more, and they're starting to do that exact same thing right now. There's been a few orders of interim champions to fight their regular champions, and they're going to vacate the Brandon Figueroa title because he's going to fight Stephen Fulton in another unification because they have other belts involved in that fight as well. So I hope it's true, but I'm not going to be suckered by the WBA again. So when somebody let me know when the WBA has only 17 world titles holders in their 17 different weight classes. And by the way, I'm not anti-interim champion. If you have a bona fide injury and a guy's going to be out for a while for whatever the reason, and you can order an interim fight. That's the way it's supposed to be. The IBF has utilized that in the proper manner over time. The WBC has done that at times also. But you can't just have a guy as interim champion, and interim means temporary in that sense. These guys make numerous defenses over years. So, let me know when they're down to 17, and I'll give them some credit. But not a minute before then.
Well, I'll give you a call when that day does happen. But going back to Pacquiao and stuff, he's hinted this might be his last fight, but I think he's also hinted that if Spence or Crawford fight, if that fight comes next, that's the only fights he would take. For you, you mentioned that this is your 24th fight covering Manny Pacquiao. I want to see the Spence fight or Pacquiao versus Crawford, but for you, you obviously want to see it, talk about that, but how sad will you be when the Pacman finally retires? I mean, like you say, we spoke off camera then, you had some fantastic memories of all these fights you've covered, but two parts to this question then. Spence Crawford for Manny Pacquiao next, and sort of like your thoughts on him retiring.
Well, look, all things come to an end. I mean, he's 42 years old. He's made the point he's going to be 43 come December. What's the old saying? I'm not the first to say this. Father Time is unbeaten. It hasn't caught up to him just yet. You only have to go back a couple years ago where people thought he might be done after the Jeff Horn fight, and he's came back. Whether his career comes to an end after this fight on Saturday against Ugas, or maybe he fights one time more or two more times, that's kind of the window we're talking about. I mean, I covered the bulk of Bernard Hopkins's, or not the bulk, but like the last 20 years of Bernard's career. He was still fighting effectively against top opponents into his 50s. I don't think that's the case with Pacquiao. It's taken way more punishment and had a lot more tougher fights than Bernard did. But the point is, it's going to end, and I'm not going to be sad about it. I think Manny is a great person. I've enjoyed my relationship with him, of watching him, of covering him, of getting to know him a little bit, and just the excitement and the energy that his events have brought to the sport, how important he has been. I mean, he is a historical figure, not just in this time, but ever since men put padded gloves on their hands and decided to fight in a square ring. I mean, he is on that level. And I've been fortunate to cover a few guys that would fall into that category. Floyd Mayweather, Mike Tyson, people along those lines, and Oscar De La Hoya, now maybe Canelo Alvarez. But I'm not going to be sad when Manny retires. I just hope when he does finally call it a day, he gets out with his senses and goes on to do other things that he aspires to. He wants to be a leader of his people. There's a possibility that this may be his last fight, even if he wins, because he's talking about the possibility of a run for the presidency of the Philippines. If the election is in May. If he wins the election, you're not going to see the president of the Philippines fight. I can see a scenario where maybe...
Can you imagine Joe Biden fighting?
I don't know about that. There's a big age difference there. But, I could see a scenario possibly where maybe he would run for president and maybe lose the election and then decide maybe have another fight. The one thing that he was very specific about when he sat with us, myself and some of the other media members after the formal part of the news conference on Wednesday, he said that if I'm going to continue to fight, I want to fight the best. And he specifically mentioned I would still want to fight Errol if he's better, cleared medically to continue with his career, as well as Terrence Crawford, and I'll fight anybody. And by the way, take 10 seconds to look at Manny's, the long list of his fights in his career. If you doubt that Manny Pacquiao is not willing to fight anybody, then you just don't know what you're looking at. The guy literally from, the time when he was at flyweight, but more particularly the great part of his career, starting at junior featherweight all the way to junior middleweight, has fought basically every single big name that he could possibly fight in that time period over those last 20 years or so. It's just remarkable. There's so many. We were talking off camera about just the sheer volume of incredible names on his record. And he was also...
We couldn't even...
We kind of forgot Hatton for a second there. But the thing about Manny's career that sets him apart from a lot of other great fighters is that Manny fought so many of those great names when they were at their best or still considered, top-notch guys. There's always a few that maybe are past their prime and that sort of thing. But by and large, the best names, he was fighting them when they were at their best. Like, he didn't fight Marquez 4 times when he was an old shot fighter. He fought Marquez when Marquez was at his best. He fought, Morales, when Morales won the first fight, when Morales was still a top fighter. Barrera was the champ when they fought at featherweight the first time. Ricky Hatton was the lineal champ. He had lost to Floyd, but he was back at 140 to fight against Manny Pacquiao, which was his best weight. Even De La Hoya, I know it turned out to be a complete wipeout, but Oscar was a big favorite in that fight. People forget that. Huge favorite. So go through that list of great opponents. And he stepped up to fight them. Margarito, a much, much bigger man who had a title. Miguel Cotto, who was a bona fide star and one of the best welterweights when he fought him. People thought that was a very dangerous fight. He didn't cherry pick guys to fight at the exact right moment. He was fighting prime guys at their best and mostly winning the fights. Tim Bradley 3 times when Tim was the top fighter. Forget about the bullshit decision in the first fight.
One thing I am interested and intrigued in when I came here is when the press conference yesterday, and a US journalist, Marcos, I think he's behind us, he mentioned to Freddie Roach the Josh Taylor fight, the undisputed fight at 140. You mentioned it here as well off camera, so I do want to get your thoughts on it, because as a Scotsman, I'm obviously going to, and I've known Josh Taylor for a long time. I know, like, Manny Pacquiao was Josh's idol growing up. He named his dog Manny. He used to call his dog Pac-Man. So Manny Pacquiao's done all these achievements, 8 division, 8-time world champion, but we spoke about off camera again, he hasn't been undisputed yet. Would the Josh Taylor fight intrigue you as a boxing journalist, as a boxing fan, and will it intrigue Manny Pacquiao?
I'll preface that by saying it's unlikely to happen, but you never...
Oh, Dan!
No. But in boxing, you never say never. An idea sprouts up and it's sort of like, oh, that's interesting. As a fan, as a journalist, I'm definitely interested because, again, Manny has gargantuan amounts of accolades and records. He's the oldest welterweight champion. He won titles in 8 weight classes more than anybody. He's the only fighter to ever win titles in 4 decades. He's the only fighter to ever be the lineal champion in 5 divisions. He was half of the biggest fight in the history of the world in terms of the revenue with the Mayweather fight. The point is he can make more history on Saturday because they took away his title. If he beats Ugas and wins a welterweight title again, he'll break his own record at age 42. My point is he's got gobs and gobs of history, phenomenal amounts of history, but he's never been undisputed. He's never had all the belts in a weight class. So when that question was asked of him in the sit-down he had with some of us after the Wednesday press conference, somebody said, hey, like you just mentioned, you've never been undisputed, and if you're going to continue your career, you mentioned Spence and Crawford and those types of guys. What would you think about maybe, would you go down and wait to challenge Josh Taylor? The point being, by the way, and Manny's never made a secret about this, Freddie talks about it all the time, Manny Pacquiao can make 140. It's not like that would be a stretch. They feed him a gazillion calories just to be in the mid-140s to weigh in for these welterweight fights, so his weight is not the issue. And Pacquiao kind of got a little smile on his face, like, that's interesting. So, again, I don't think it will happen, but you never say never. But I think that would be, obviously for Josh would be a huge opportunity to fight a legend like that in his idol in just a huge, huge fight. And Pacquiao, the one thing that continues to drive great fighters, when they're looking for, they always need some kind of hook. Why am I doing this? And if the opportunity was there for Manny legitimately to be able to fight and become undisputed in a weight class that he's never, and he'd never been undisputed in any weight class, I think that would be of interest, and it would certainly be a huge fight. I would love it.
I think I would love it as well, to be honest. Like I said to you, I've known Josh for a long time. I know how much he loves Manny Pacquiao, so for him to face Manny Pacquiao would just be, I think he could retire after that. He'd win, lose or draw against Manny Pacquiao, I'm pretty sure. Josh, I've got 4 minutes left on my SIM card here, so I want to get your thoughts on Joshua, Usyk and the trilogy with Wilder Fury. I'll just give you the mic and just you crack on and just break down them 2 fights for me.
Well, Wilder Fury, look, I think everybody expects Tyson and Fury to hope, that they will finally meet in October after all the delays and everything that's occurred over the last couple of months with that situation. Look, the onus is going to be on Deontay Wilder to prove that what happened in the second fight, that he can change that result, because it was a complete ass-kicking by Tyson Fury, a dominating performance, and but people go through things. You don't know where each of their head is, what they're training, how it's gone. I know one thing, no matter what training Deontay Wilder has done or not done, that if he hits you with his right hand, he can knock you out. And Fury's got to be ready for that. But, I saw Tyson posted on social media that he was coming back to the States to do the training camp, and he was going offline, and it wasn't going to be on Twitter and, focus on the camp. Basically said, I'll talk to you, October 10th, I believe, the day after the fight. So hopefully we get a good fight, and, if Tyson wins, hopefully we'll see the undisputed fight. Fury's got to do his job against Deontay, and obviously Anthony's got to do the job against Usyk. That's a worthwhile fight, but I like Joshua to beat Usyk, not because I don't have ample respect for Usyk. He's a tremendous fighter, but all the things he's done as a cruiserweight, he's had injuries, and he just hasn't looked all that good as a heavyweight. Let's be honest about it. He's a terrific fighter of the year, a gold medal winner like Anthony was. But, the very pedestrian performance in the first heavyweight fight against Chaz Witherspoon, a guy that was many years past his best days. He did get the stoppage, but there was nothing earth-shattering there. And I thought he looked kind of bad against Chisora. It was a tough, close fight. I respect Chisora, but if you're going to be a dominating heavyweight and win the heavyweight championship, you should probably handle Chisora a little bit better than that. So to me, it's an uphill battle. He's got good feet, he's got quickness, he's got IQ. So maybe a few rounds he gives Joshua some trouble. He's going to have to find him, maybe figure it out. But as I've said in some other talking to some other people, the amount of respect I have for the implementation of a game plan by Rob McCracken is off the charts. I think he's one of the most underrated strategists in the entire sport. He's phenomenal. And the kind of game plan he came up with against Andy Ruiz, I think he'll be able to do the same thing for Anthony. And Joshua proved to be a great student because they put the game plan against Ruiz and he followed it to a T. And I think they can do the same thing against Usyk. And also, Joshua's got that big punching power also. So, it's a fight that he should win.
Well, I won't keep you much longer. You are pressed for time. I know you had to go and do something. So, Dan, as always, it's a pleasure to speak to you, mate. And I love talking boxing with you because your boxing knowledge is probably a little bit better than mine, which is good.
Don't sell yourself.
But thank you so much, and let's look forward to Saturday night, Pacquiao versus Ugas.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.